You reach a certain age, 60, 65, 70, and the world assumes you have stepped off the stage of desire. But women know better. They know that attraction doesn't retire, it evolves. It becomes finer, subtler, quieter, and yet far more potent. And the truth is, women over 40, 50, and 60, they are not looking at you the way younger women once did. They're not counting abs. They're not measuring your shoulders. They are paying attention to something else entirely, the silent parts of you, the unspoken signals, the places where your history, your health, your confidence, and your emotional presence lived as men cross into their 60s. Something subtle yet powerful happens in the way women look at them. It's not that attraction fades, it's that the criteria shift. When women pay attention to a man over 60, they're not scanning him for the same markers they did in his 30s or 40s. They're no longer interested in superficial perfection or the competitive bravado that often defines early adulthood. Instead, they look for the essence of a man, how he carries the experiences of his life, how he channels his history into the present moment, and how his presence makes them feel. Attention becomes more discerning, more intuitive, more emotionally intelligent, and it shifts from the outside to the inside, from aesthetics to energy. A woman at this stage of her life has lived enough to know what truly matters. She has seen charm without depth, beauty without kindness, and confidence without responsibility. So when she looks at a man now, she is looking for something that lasts. She is looking for the way his face softens when he listens, the ease in his gestures, the warmth in his eyes. She notices how he responds to the world. Does he carry bitterness or curiosity? Does his body express stress or serenity? Is he closed off or still open to connection, learning, and joy? These details reveal far more than youthfulness ever could. They show whether he is emotionally alive. This shift in attention also reflects a deeper cultural truth. Attraction in later life is not driven by fantasy but by resonance. Women pay attention to signs of vitality, not in the sense of physical peak but in the sense of emotional movement. A man's age can add layers to his attractiveness, wisdom, humor, resilience, perspective, qualities that cannot be faked. And women recognize them instantly. They can see when a man has grown from his experiences rather than hardened by them. They notice when he is self-assured in a quiet way, not performing masculinity but embodying it. This kind of presence is magnetic. Women over 60 also look for how a man inhabits his own body. Not whether it is flawless, but whether he is comfortable in it. Comfort signals acceptance. Acceptance signals maturity. Maturity signals safety and strength. And for many women, that is deeply appealing. They want to know that a man has made peace with himself and is capable of offering the kind of emotional steadiness that comes only with lived experience. When attention shifts with age, it shifts toward the man's essence, the way he enters a room, the way he makes others feel, and the depth he brings into conversation. These are the qualities that shape attraction now, the ones that speak far louder than youthful aesthetics ever did. As men enter their 60s, the language of attraction becomes far more nuanced, and women begin paying attention to signs that reveal something deeper than physical appearance. What they are truly seeking is a sense of vitality, not the youthful energy that comes from being physically invincible, but the quieter, richer vitality that emerges from emotional engagement with life. This kind of vitality shows up in the smallest gestures, the way a man's eyes light up when he talks about something he loves, the interest he shows when listening to someone else, or the curiosity that still flickers when he encounters something new. Women are drawn to men who show that they haven't stopped growing, that they haven't let the world dull their sense of wonder, and that they still feel connected to something larger than their routines. Vitality, at this stage, is not measured by athletic performance or social dominance. It's measured by emotional aliveness. A man who still laughs easily, who still finds joy in simple things, who maintains friendships, habits, passions, or even just rituals that nourish him, these qualities signal to a woman that he is not living out the remainder of his life on autopilot. Instead, he is present, awake, and engaged. Women notice if a man still has a spark in him, a sense of purpose or at least a sense of pleasure in being alive. Even the way he moves can express vitality. Is his posture open or collapsed? Does he walk with intention or resignation? Does his body reflect someone who participates in his own life, or someone who has withdrawn from it? These are subtle cues, but to a woman who knows how to read them, they communicate volumes. This is also the stage of life where vitality becomes intertwined with emotional availability. A man who is too guarded, too detached, or too resigned often appears dull, not because he lacks physical attractiveness, but because he lacks emotional presence. Women sense when a man is emotionally reachable, when he can share a story, reflect on his experiences, or sit with someone without drifting away. Vitality shows up in a man's capacity to care about himself, care about others, care about what happens next. It reveals itself in the way he listens, in the way he responds to challenges, and in the way he holds himself through the ups and downs of daily life. Women at this stage have often cultivated their own forms of vitality. They read, they travel, they pursue interests, they nurture relationships, and they want a partner who can meet them in that space. Not someone to compete with, but someone who is simply alive with them. The presence of vitality reassures them that a man still has emotional depth, that he can bring warmth and connection into a relationship, and that he is not merely aging but evolving. Confidence becomes something entirely different after 60. It sheds the layers of ego, competition, and performance that often define earlier stages of life, and it settles into something deeper, quieter, and far more compelling. Women at this age are not looking for the loudest man in the room or the one who tries to assert himself through dominance or status. They are drawn to the man who is grounded in who he is, a man who does not need to prove, persuade, or posture. This kind of confidence shows up in small, effortless behaviors. It's in the way he speaks without rushing, the way he listens without interrupting, the way he holds himself without needing constant validation. It communicates that he has made peace with his strengths and his flaws, and that he lives from a place of inner steadiness rather than external approval. Women notice this kind of confidence immediately because it creates a sense of emotional safety. It tells them that the man is not easily threatened, that he won't crumble under pressure, and that he understands himself well enough to move through the world with calm assurance. A man who is comfortable in his own skin brings a kind of clarity and simplicity to a relationship. He doesn't play games, he doesn't hide behind bravado, and he doesn't need to be the center of attention. His presence alone becomes a signal of maturity. Women over 60 appreciate this because they have often lived through relationships where insecurity created chaos, misunderstandings, or emotional distance. Now, they gravitate toward a man who embodies stability rather than spectacle. This grounded confidence also reveals itself in how a man responds to challenges or discomfort. A man who carries true self-assurance doesn't get defensive easily. He can admit when he's wrong, stay open when he disagrees, and adapt when life shifts unexpectedly. Women view this as a sign of emotional intelligence, and it is incredibly attractive because it reflects resilience and humility. The combination of these qualities hints at a man who has learned from life rather than been wounded by it. His confidence isn't a shield, it's a foundation. Another quality that women notice is whether a man's confidence is paired with kindness. Confidence without compassion feels cold, distant, or arrogant. But when a man is self-assured and also attuned to the feelings of others, it shows he has developed a humanity that only time can teach. Women find themselves drawn to men who know how to take up space without overshadowing others, who can be strong without being controlling, and who can lead without demanding obedience. In this stage of life, confidence becomes less about asserting power and more about demonstrating presence. It is the quiet certainty of a man who knows who he is and no longer needs to perform for anyone. The energy a man carries becomes one of the strongest, most noticeable qualities as he moves into his 60s and beyond. It's not the loud, youthful energy of trying to impress or outperform others. It is something deeper, quieter, more intentional. Women pay close attention to this because a man's energy reveals how he feels about himself, how he engages with the world, and how he treats the people around him. It shows itself in the way he walks into a room, not by demanding attention, but by the calm or chaos he brings with him. Some men carry tension like a second skin, their movements stiff, their voices sharp, their presence heavy. Others have a softness, a steadiness, a grounded way of being that makes those around them feel safe, seen, and at ease. This energy speaks before he even opens his mouth. Women notice whether he moves with intention or with exhaustion, whether his posture displays defeat or dignity, whether he interacts with life as something burdensome or something still worth engaging. It is less about physical health and more about emotional posture. A man can be physically aging yet radiate a kind of inner brightness that makes him attractive. Conversely, a man may be physically strong but carry an energy that feels closed, guarded, or indifferent. Women are highly attuned to these signals because they have learned through experience that energy determines the emotional climate of a relationship. A man's energy also reveals how he handles his internal world. Does he carry bitterness from old wounds, or has he processed his past enough to move with lightness? Is he easily irritated, or has he cultivated patience? Does he approach life with curiosity or with resignation? These elements show up in subtle ways: how he responds to unexpected situations, how he treats strangers, how he listens, and how he holds himself when no one is watching. Women look for these cues because they speak to emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is magnetic. It indicates that a man is not just older, but wiser, and that his presence will bring harmony rather than turbulence. Another important aspect of energy is how a man balances strength and softness. Women are drawn to men who can be firm when needed yet gentle in their interactions. It reflects a man who has integrated different parts of himself, who is not afraid of vulnerability, and who is capable of empathy. This balance shows an emotional richness that younger versions of himself may not have possessed. It is the energy of a man who has learned, who has lived, and who has grown. Women sense when a man carries this kind of energy, and it tells them that he is still fully alive in the ways that matter most. As men move into their 60s, it becomes increasingly clear that it's not the obvious or traditionally celebrated body parts that define their attractiveness. Women are not primarily focused on chiseled features, sculpted muscles, or the physical symbols of youth. Instead, they notice the quieter parts of a man's body, the ones that speak without trying, the ones that reveal character, health, emotional presence, and the lived reality of who he has become. These parts hold the subtle details that give a woman insight into how a man treats himself, how he moves through the world, and how he might show up in a relationship. It is these understated features that tell the truth more reliably than the parts men often obsess over. Women pay attention to the hands, for instance, not for perfection but for what they reveal. Hands show how a man has worked, how he has cared, how he touches the world around him. They can reflect gentleness or tension, patience or restlessness. A woman notices whether his touch feels considerate or hurried, whether his gestures communicate calmness or agitation. She pays attention to the way he places his hand on the back of a chair, how he greets someone, how he holds a cup, because these details speak to his inner state more clearly than any verbal claim. They also notice the eyes, not for their color or symmetry but for their emotional clarity. Eyes reveal whether a man is still engaged with life or whether he has retreated from it. They show humor, warmth, fatigue, curiosity, and everything in between. A woman can sense whether a man sees her or merely looks at her, whether he has presence or distraction behind his gaze. The eyes tell her if he is emotionally reachable, if he listens with attention, or if he lives behind a wall he no longer intends to climb out of. Even posture becomes a silent storyteller. Does he carry himself with openness or with collapse? Does he move like someone who still participates in his life, or like someone who has surrendered to it? Posture isn't about physical strength, it's about emotional orientation toward life, toward others, toward himself. Women pick up on this instantly because it communicates confidence, resilience, and self-respect without a single word being spoken. And then there is the face, not for youthful symmetry, but for expression. Lines can be beautiful when they reflect kindness, humor, and a life lived with engagement rather than constant stress. The micro-expressions, the softness in the jaw, the ease in the forehead, the way a man smiles when something genuinely moves him, these reveal far more than age or structure. Women are drawn to the body parts that reveal truth, not performance. The ones that demonstrate presence, emotional availability, health of spirit, and the quiet confidence of a man who has grown into himself rather than away from himself.